So our final talk of the session is by Sue Liu from the University of Sheffield, and her talk is titled Visitor Intrudes and Decolonises Natural History, a not-so-scientific perspective.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sue, and I'm doing English. It's not very scientific, no. And doing a presentation is not part of my curriculum, unfortunately, so please bear with me. So this presentation is going to be about how to write about people and how to present those people to people, as in audiences, and that is sort of what we're trying to do with decolonisation, as in it's not just about the collection, but it's about starting with the people and then presenting them to the people. So yeah, it's not very scientific. I wonder if I can play this video. This is just to show what I've done. No, I don't think it's playing. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think it's playing. Because does it play? No. It just opens another tab. So so basically I was going to show some basic features of what I've done. This is a visual novel game that I've created for National Museum in Cardiff. It's based on some of the mosses in their archives that are not on display. So basically what you do is that you have a narrative, you have characters, you have dialogues. You can do your own dialogue, you can have options. But because this is a very historical narrative, we try not to let any of those choice making affect the entire story, because we know that as history, and we try to be fictional, but we also try to be, well, fact oriented and not too original after all. So so this is sort of the workflow. It all starts with idea pitching. So when I started doing this internship about 2 years ago, I had no clue what I was going to do, because I'm not doing history, I'm not doing sciences. I told my supervisor, Nathan Smith, that I can perhaps make a story or a game. And he says, okay, great, that's what you're going to do. So idea pitching, the text on top is part of the document made by my colleague, Harry Poynton, also from the University of Sheffield. He's doing history, so that his work is to sort of decipher that historical account for the entire project. So thanks to him, I was able to work on the story. And so the story is about the moss collection, which could not have been done without the help of the indigenous people. So as I was saying, as a creator, I think about what is the most interesting, notable items and people and anecdotes. So if you think from a visitor's perspective, this is maybe something that you want to think about is the story and the people that would eventually attract somebody's attention. And that, of course, can be done with VR and a lot of different stuff that can be beyond playing a game on a browser, but I will come back to that in a bit. So we started off with identifying what collections we're going to work on. So in the initial first 3 days or so, we went to the museum, we went to the archives, and we decided on those specific characters, and we started researching. So I will also come back to that in a bit, because that sort of involves the whole connection of different people and events. So format. So once we've decided on what story and what people to talk about, we start looking at what kind of game or what story format we want to look into. So do you want story based? Do you want something that somebody can read, or do you want something you can play with? Interactive doesn't mean that you have to make a game that's like an actual video game, but you can also have sort of like an exhibition that has someone to operate with you, so that you can interact with the person. For example, if the person is an artist, then that is also part of the interaction with the collection. And that also works with placemaking. So placemaking, if it's something that was frequently mentioned in our internship, basically what it means is just we have to use that advantage of the space of the museum itself. So if, for example, you have, if you take Museum in Cardiff, for example, they have this one cabinet. It's just one cabinet of monsters, which actually wasn't that attractive to me. So I thought, what if you could, for example, once I've made this narrative and I generate a QR code, and then you can put it next to this small cabinet, which also, of course, has a description of the essential facts. And then people will walk by, people will see it. If it's new, they will be interested and they will click on it. They will click on a link, they will scan the QR code, and then they will try to, well, look into what's so special about the monsters at all. Also, you might want to think about why you want to make this into a narrative. Do you want it to just be a demonstration of your collection, or maybe like a referencing? By referencing, I mean you can turn it into a digital encyclopedia of like the collection. You can scan all your specimens and put it on a browser page. That is sort of one of the examples of referencing, which is basically just a database, except you add some stories to it so people can actually read and remember what's going on with everything. So Twine is one of the open source softwares that I used to create all of these things. It's pretty straightforward. This picture here is another project that I was working on. It's an example of how you might use images that people can interact with. So it's not just about the text. It can also be, for example, the different parts of an artifact that you can click on, and then it will show different results, that sort of thing. This is also a video, which unfortunately cannot play. So that video was going to show something about the mechanics, which unfortunately I tried to explain to the curators and they did not get a lot of it. This is one of the challenges we've had when it comes to collaboration, because this is one of our Monday meetings. The best way to do it is just to show an example, really. And that actually works pretty well. The one thing we had to face was advertising, because that involves the big bosses, and we are yet to deal with that. So why storytelling? Well, if you see that highlight in Skunk, that was one of the stories I had to pick because I thought that was actually kind of funny. So it's all about the stories. It's all about the anecdotes. And of course, you can put a story into any other sort of media, including VR. So it's also about how descriptive the early modern science accounts are. They include absolutely everything, including failures, which is great for storytelling. I'm just going to quickly go through that because I have like 3 minutes left. Anyway, this is sort of like the literary bit that I was working on. The real challenge with recreating history is about whether you want an immersive narrative, because the real issue is when you're trying to represent how people talk, and you also want facts, but you don't want over dramatic, excuse my French. Yeah, so nitpicking is something else that I was doing for a long time, because I was working so hard on the story itself, but really, we want to focus on the people and how they dealt with that collection. What is so important about those people, those specific people that were neglected, that those people, the stories that were deeply connected in that culture, something that we could represent in a different way. So for example, this from a poem, this is from a very old book, of course, 200 years old. I think this is pretty much one of the most original representations of connecting this specimen with the actual people, and it's pretty much something that we can work on as well, but I would still choose to work on this one because it is it is a very rare case of the scientist himself actually crediting those Native Americans because of that very specific time period, because it was an era of exploit, and many of the times people have this structural discrimination over the people. So as I'm saying, this is a particularly fortunate case. That's why we chose this one to work on the story. So this is just a conclusion of the ideas that you can think of if you're trying to make a collaborative project on how to represent a story of those neglected. And is there something I'm missing? Is there something I'm missing? One thing I might just check is that the alternatives, they work better when you're introducing some of the concepts and cultures and something that doesn't necessarily have an origin, and just don't worry too much about being ambiguous. So I've been told to stop. But I couldn't have done this without you. So I have to thank my supervisor Nathan and Catherine for all of this. But if anyone is interested in the game itself, feel free to scan that QR code. And thank you very much.
Very much so. Anyone got any questions? You're going to have to leave that up so we can all play it. Everyone's getting it.
It's just wouldn't play.
Very exciting.
I think there was a question in the quick one. It was so what advice would you give to a museum that's interested in placemaking?
Placemaking. There is actually a type of narrative. We actually call it museum narrative. So this is something we do in like digital narrative. So there's actually a book about it, museum narrative, as in so normally you would have like a route map within a museum. This is something you can transform into a smaller space, for example, like a room. Because normally you have very spacious rooms in a museum, and something that they've done in Cardiff is that I can't quite remember the name of the exhibition, but it's a exhibition of physical artifacts, like contemporary ones, that represent sort of I think it was a African, like a cultural experience. So what they do is that they would make a pathway in the room so that as you go through that pathway, you would see the different fragments of sort of that cultural experience sort of thing. And there's something I would mention is the use of sound. I was going to mention it, but that video wouldn't play. So the thing with sound is that it's the first thing you would pay attention to when you go into one space, and then you might want to follow that sound throughout that space, if that makes sense. It can be sort of like a signpost. Probably another good example is the Hunterian Museum, where they have like a representation of John Hunter. His voice is sort of like a Scottish accent, and you can immediately hear it before you actually read the story, the narrative, which I think is like a great example.
Any other questions? No?
There's one here. How did you find the stories you used, and how did you choose which ones you were going to go with?
So the one thing is that we have this one archive. It's just a room full of lockers of ex carte, basically the specimen books. So on the first day, we went to that room. It's really just an archive sort of thing, and we looked into the things that are related to like a distant, so that it's not just based in the UK, but more of, for example, in the 1800s. Typically, we would look at the collections that come from maybe North America. So we kind of just narrowed it down to that period of time and that region on the map. And then Harry, my colleague, is more experienced in this because he was doing history. So he worked on most of the like trying to narrow down on that particular account of Thomas Drummond. That was the main thing that we worked on. And then I would use that as a clue and look at BHL for other accounts that were related to that account. So it's sort of like a network, really.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That concludes the third session. Thanks, everyone. We are going to have a short break now, comfort break for everyone. And we're going to get back underway at 15:55. Yes.